Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of divorce, the words stressful and expensive spring to mind. Indeed, according to UK figures published in 2014, the average couple spends £44,000 on their separation. But now, a local law firm, Viberts, is aiming to change that by introducing something called transparent fees. Well, joining me now to talk a bit more about that are advocates Rose Colley and Jamie Orchard from Viberts Family Law Team. Rose, firstly to you, what are transparent fees?
Transparent fees are a new fee structure whereby you'll easily be able to see at each stage of the process what it is likely to cost you, so there will be no big surprises at the end.
Jamie, how does transparent fees differ from fixed fees? Because we know that other law firms do offer that.
The typical fixed fee divorce really only relates to the procedural aspect of no longer being married and making that a legal reality. Transparent fees relate to the wider aspect of the divorce process, which includes the finances, and the purpose of the transparent fees is to try and map your journey through the process, in order that the client is aware of how much each stage will cost, so that there are no hidden costs or nasty surprises.
I think what people don't realise is that the divorce bit is actually quite cheap. Where all the money goes is in relation to dealing with the finances, particularly where the finances aren't clear, and that's where the potential thousands and thousands of pounds in legal fees build up. And it's that area where this new transparent fee proposal will show you at each stage what it's going to cost you, which, as far as I'm aware, no other law firm in the island, or indeed as far as I can tell in England, actually does.
So, Rose, how much does a divorce typically cost in Jersey?
It very much depends. If it's a sort of case where you can't agree things, but eventually you do agree things, you're probably looking at 15,000 in total. If it's the sort of case where there are any complications or where the parties simply really don't like each other, then it can be 40,000 typically. In the worst sort of cases, there was a case, for example, recently, nothing to do with us, that went to the Royal Court, which cost each of the people within the couple in excess of £200,000 each.
How much cheaper then is a transparent process?
Well, you can potentially save thousands of pounds. I mean, it largely depends on how the case progresses. So we encourage very much that the parties will settle out of court. If they do that, the fees are a lot cheaper. You won't get into those spiralling legal fees. That there will be a cap, there is a ceiling as to when those fees will stop being incurred to you, and you will know about them ahead of time as well. The benefit of that is that the client is aware of how much it will cost at the end of the day. They can budget their own spending far more accurately. They have the clarity as to what those fees are and the process that you'll be going through.
Talk us through the various stages of divorce and associated costs.
Well, the first stage is the mechanics of getting unmarried, and as I said earlier, that typically will cost £1,500. That's the easy bit. You then, in many cases, because many people in the island do have some finances to unravel, you then need to start unravelling the finances. And the first stage is that you need to have what's called financial disclosure. And that means that you have to exchange quite detailed financial information. Now, that stage can either be easy or it can be more difficult. So, for example, if, let's say, husband says, actually, I can't find any of those credit card statements, or I can't get that information from my pension supplier, that will actually potentially add to the cost, certainly where lawyers are charging by the hourly rate. You then get a stage whereby you know what is in the matrimonial pot, And that means that you can begin to negotiate. Now, at that stage, ideally, couples will negotiate, and that can be done in a variety of ways. In a few cases, the negotiations either don't happen or they completely break down, and that's where you start to go on this, what can be a fairly painful journey through the actual court process. And at the end of that process, you have what is called a final hearing, which could be a day in court, or it could be up to 10 days in court. It just depends on all of the issues in a particular case. We, through all our experience of dealing with this over a number of years, we've taken market research from cases that we've done, we've looked at market research elsewhere, and we are pretty certain that the bands that we now, within the transparent fee process, look at for each stage will cover all the necessary and essential work that needs to be done.
With this mapped out transparent process, how does that benefit divorcing couples?
The primary benefit is certainty. It is being able to see in black and white how much this process will cost you, and being able to make informed decisions about the route that you should take and the subsequent costs implications of taking that route. And it takes out that anxiety that a lot of people may have in terms of when the usual way that people would be charged is on an hourly basis, and those monthly bills come through and they can vary drastically. To have that anxiety on top of the general emotional stress of going through the divorce process is something that we're trying to avoid.
Can transparent fees apply to all types of divorce?
They would probably apply to round about 80–85% of cases, certainly that we typically deal with. There are always going to be some cases where either couples are arguing about what's called conduct, i.e. where one is saying he drank all the money away, or she spent too much on the horses. There are those sorts of cases, or cases where things are so complicated that involve potentially trusts, but not just trusts in Jersey. Very often they're spread out in various jurisdictions throughout the world. There are a very few cases, and I emphasise very few, where one party or the other, sadly often the husband, is hiding money away. Those are cases where it is impossible to predict what the cost will be, but they also tend to be cases where you're looking at certainly several million in terms of the matrimonial pot. You're not looking at the typical family in Jersey who may have a house, a pension, perhaps a few assets by way of savings accounts, where the pot may well be $1 million or so.
When getting divorced, what are the options facing divorcing couples? Do they always have to go to court?
Absolutely not. I think there is a misconception in the general public that all divorce cases end in a court battle, and that's certainly something that we at Viberts strive to avoid. We promote the use of alternate dispute resolution, or ADR as it's called, which deals with a wide variety of different options. And under the transparent fee process, we account for that, and we provide certainty in terms of your fees, in terms of each of those processes.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps if I can just add, what tends to happen is as long as you've got all the financial information, you don't have to end up in a court battle at all. And the transparent fee process will tell you what it will cost if you have the big battle in court, but also what it will cost if you use what's called alternative dispute resolution. Now, that is relatively expensive, but not nearly expensive as having that 2-day discussion, which might turn into a 5-day argument before the court.
Judges have also been rather critical of high legal costs, haven't they?
Absolutely, and they have, I think, largely been levied at the family law sort of sector, because as Rose has said, the costs that are being paid out to the lawyers are simply diminishing the matrimonial pot, which is what everybody's arguing about anyway. And it's because it's such an emotive subject, it's very easy to eat into that matrimonial pot, and at the end of the day you walk away with very little. So the idea behind the transparent fees is to try and mitigate those costs down to as little as possible.
Is there a risk, though, that by setting out a cost at each stage that you may end up rushing the work?
I don't think there's any danger of that, because with this process, unlike the hourly rate, the client is far more in control, and the client will far more clearly see at each stage the essential work that needs to be done. In the vast majority of cases, we know from our research that things can be done under this structure, and a client at the outset will have a good idea as to what it is all going to cost.
And with transparency, I guess there's trust.
Absolutely, and that's what we'd like to build up with our clients, is that they have an understanding of the fees, and they know what to expect. They know and have a better understanding of the court process, so that they can become more involved and they feel that they're more engaged in the process. And with that, will hopefully become that trust that forms the basis of a good client-lawyer relationship.
I guess people sitting at home are going to be thinking, what's in it for you, the law firm, going down the road of transparent fees? Because the more uncertain the case, the longer the hours, the more you can charge. So how does transparent fees benefit Viberts?
The transparent fee system gives Viberts as a firm the ability to see how much we are going to charge, and we can, as a firm, we can budget in respect of that. The client, often in an hourly rate system, will feel that they're losing control.
So by setting out the cost at each stage, how much more efficient does that make the working?
The client will understand the process far more. The lawyer will know and understand that they are working within a set fee for that stage of the work, and that too can lead to certain efficiencies. But I think the most important thing is that the client who trusts you will find it far easier to give you instructions, will find it far easier to deal with the process, and of course, unlike under the hourly rate, they can choose which of the various paths they go down in a way that at the moment they probably wouldn't even begin to think about or indeed understand.
Why are Viberts the first to come up with this solution?
We have given this a lot of thought. We have a wealth of experience because we are a big family law team, possibly the biggest on the island, and we have therefore decided that no one really likes the hourly rate anymore, certainly not when it's all coming from the same pot, and therefore we've tried to think of a different way of doing things. The fixed fee is something in reality that doesn't really exist. It's incredibly difficult to predict at day one exactly the fixed fee that you can do the work for, because as we've explained, you can go down different paths throughout the process. So what our experience has showed us is that if you go down a path that says A to E, this is your typical cost and this is what it will cost you. But if you have to go from A to Y, then it will potentially cost you more, and this is what it will cost you. And therefore, I think it puts far more control in the hands of the client.
Well, it's a fascinating development, and because it's an issue that affects so many people, I'm sure many are going to be interested in it. So advocates Rose Colley and Jamie Orchard, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.